Hey everyone, it's Jason Pannone, Head of Reference and Cultural Assets Manager here at the East Hartford Public Library. For this installment of Raiders of the Lost Archive, I'm going to show you two small artifacts that we have that are supposedly items carved from pieces of the Charter Oak. Now, if you don't know about the Charter Oak, I'm going to get into it a little bit later, but take a look at these two small pieces, one of which is a brooch carved in the shape of an acorn and an oak leaf, which I think is really neat. And the other is just a very simple cross pendant made out of wood. So with that, take a look. So you can see here that the pieces are quite small. They're just a little bit bigger than a quarter. The detail on them is really neat, especially the brooch with the oak carvings. The acorn has a lot of detail, the oak leaves, and even the cross is pretty in its simplicity, with the little bits of metal on it as end caps. Now you might be wondering what's the big deal about the Charter Oak. You probably have seen the name around Connecticut. There's the Charter Oak Bridge in Hartford. There's Charter Oak Federal Credit Union down in southeastern Connecticut. And the name is all around the state. And the painting you see here is an idealized painting of Charter Oak that was done after it blew down in a storm in 1856. This is by the painter Charles de Wolfe Brownell, and it's called the Charter Oak. It was painted in 1857, and you can currently see this at the Wadsworth Athenaeum in Hartford. Now, the Charter Oak is kind of legendary in the founding of Connecticut. The first reference goes back to the early 1600s when I believe it was Henry Hudson. Let me confirm on that. Nope, Adrian Block. The Dutch explorer Adrian Block, he made a note in his log when he traveled up the Connecticut River that he had seen this giant oak tree, which is believed to be the Charter Oak. Later, when the English settlers come in, Native Americans approached, from the local tribes, approached Stephen Willis, who was one of the Hartford's first landowners. And as he was clearing his land, the Native American tribes came up and asked him to spare the tree because they believed it was an old tree, they believed it had power, they held council under it, and Willis agreed. So that's kind of the background of the tree. So I'm going to stop here, and then I'm going to give you a little bit more where the story gets interesting. So Connecticut was granted a very generous charter by King Charles II of England, wherein they were allowed to choose a lot of their own elected officials without having to get permission from the crown or waiting from Parliament or the king himself to appoint officials. And it was a very generous and open charter among the colonies. So Charles II dies, his brother James II takes the throne, and he kind of wants to clamp down. He wants a little less freewheeling, he wants more control over the colonies to provide revenue. So he sends the chap you see here, Sir Edmund Andros, who had been governor of the island of Guernsey, which is one of the Channel Islands off the coast of France. And Andros was in tight with the British monarchy. He'd done fairly well in Guernsey, so he was sent to the colonies to become governor of what was going to be called the Dominion of New England. And this Dominion of New England was basically everything from all the colonies, Maine, which was then part of Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and New York and New Jersey were all going to be under this one large colony called the Dominion of New England, and Andros was to be the governor. Now, Andros was kind of a haughty, imperious man, very conscientious, a very good administrator, but did not read the 17th century equivalent of How to Make Friends and Influence People. He alienated a lot of people, tried to, basically in Puritan New England, especially in Puritan Massachusetts, tried to establish the Church of England, and that, as you can imagine, went over like a lead balloon. So the story goes that Andros marches into Connecticut, and comes to Hartford, and he demands a copy of the Royal Charter. And Connecticut refuses, and he keeps coming and he keeps pestering, and finally he shows up with soldiers and demanding the charter. So on October 31st, you get the date right. Oh gracious, I can't find it. Anyway, he came to take the charter, and the story goes that at a given signal, somebody in the room knocked over the candles and all the lights went out. And of course, this being before the age of electric lighting, the room is pitch black. Somebody grabs the charter, according to one version of the story, passes it out to somebody else out in the room, passes it out the window to somebody else who runs off and hides it in what is now known as the Charter Oak. Hides it in a crevice. Andros is never able to find it. Doesn't stop him. Eventually, he does create the Dominion of New England, which lasts for about 2 years, until basically all the New England colonies revolt, send out the militia, and drive him out of office. And shortly thereafter, James II is deposed, and Andros returns to England. And there's all sorts of stories that the oak, which had been dying, all of a sudden miraculously started to come alive again and puts out new leaves. There's all sorts of hagiography about it. You can see the charter itself at the Connecticut State Library and the Connecticut Museum, and the frame around the charter is made from the charter oak. And it's big for Connecticut because it's about American independence. It's about Connecticut standing up to the British government at the time and resisting tyranny and things like that. So it's really part of the mythology of the state of Connecticut and its founding. Given all these idealistic portraits and legends around the Charter Oak, it's actually kind of cool that it lived long enough to be photographed. And the first photograph you see is from 1856, just before it fell. So you can get a sense of what the tree looked like and kind of where it sat in Connecticut. The second picture is taken the morning of its fall. There was a big windstorm that knocked it down, and there was days of mourning. Pieces of it were taken, like I said, to be carved into wood, like the little treasures we have. Chairs were carved out of the trunk. There's the ceremonial seat of the president of the Connecticut State Senate. Has a chair made out of that. There's a number of items in the Capitol of the Connecticut Historical Society that are made of pieces of the Charter Oak and wood of the Charter Oak. There is a monument that it's erected to the fallen oak. It's right in the location of it. It's at the corner of Charter Oak Avenue and Charter Oak Place in downtown Hartford. And that was erected in 1905. So it's interesting how a tree really becomes part of the mythology and the lore of Connecticut's founding, and gives the state one of its many nicknames, the Charter Oak State, and why it's important to our conception of resisting tyrants and taking away liberty. It's kind of a neat thing. So what I'm going to do is I'll throw up a few things in the video description so you can look for, you can get the details on the paintings and the photos and learn a little bit more about the Charter Oak. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed that, and we'll see you next time. So practice your safe social distancing, wash your hands, wear a mask, and we'll see you next time. Bye.